always forget that thing. So we'll call it meeting to order at 6:30. Go over a few housekeeping items here at the beginning in regards to public participation. At this meeting, we have two opportunities for public participation. One at the beginning, where we ask for feedback on any items that you might find on the agenda. And if you'd like to speak, please fill out a yellow form and hand it in, and we'll get you up here. And then second time is at the end of the meeting for any other items not pertaining to the agenda. So getting that out of the way, we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Randy, do we have any additional agenda items this evening?
We do not.
Do we have any public comment on agenda items? Awesome. All right. So consent agenda board, you should have received some items in your packet in regards to last month's minutes. There's an employee, a young 5 teacher and financials. Is there anything anybody would like to pull out of the consent agenda or any discussion on the consent agenda? Do you want to introduce the new teacher? Or?
All right. So recently we did fill an open vacancy that we had in our Early Childhood Education Center with a Young Fives position. That was the result of some kind of internal shuffling from some open special education positions that we had. And so we had the opening available, and we'd like to welcome Kristen Simpson. Kristen is here today. And welcome. Yeah. Longtime Mattawan resident. Kids are in the district, and this is first teaching position. So very excited to have Kristen here, and she had been serving as a paraprofessional for a couple of weeks before the posting came open, and then applied for the position, and now has taken over her own classroom. So, yeah, absolutely. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the agenda? Or, on the consent agenda? Actually, I need a motion first.
Make a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mark. A second?
Second.
Thanks, Vicki. So having a motion and a second, any discussion on the agenda, on the consent agenda?
Just sort of a question or suggestion, not knowing the background, but as we look through minutes, just wondering if it would be helpful that when we say, 6 board members present, 1 absent, shall we note who is absent for kind of future minutes? I kind of noted that. And then the other thing is, shall we think about including any of the presentation materials with the minutes? It'll say who's the presenter, but we don't include any of what their presentation is. So I'm just kind of looking forward, and I was looking through some past minutes of if that's worthy or not, or we have to decide tonight, just comments for suggestions, I think.
I was listed as absent last month on the minutes.
Yeah, it usually is, but it was missed on one. On the September.
Yeah, we'll get that corrected. Normally we do note that.
Yeah, I say October, it wasn't, but.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. Yep. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Welcome. That makes it official, so appreciate it. Thanks for coming and being a part of it. So we have a little bit of a full slate tonight. we got, update from the YMCA. We also have, we'll be going into closed session at a portion of the meeting tonight to discuss, the superintendent evaluation. And we got some other topics to discuss on the agenda. So we'll kick it off with the YMCA update. Exciting.
I'd like to welcome members from our task force or committee on the YMCA project, and appreciate you both coming out this evening and presenting to the board and kind of catching the board up since what's it been, a couple years since the committee got together pre-COVID. And
Not sure what, can we just plug it in, so.
it should, yeah, well,
There you go.
okay, fingers crossed.
All right.
But welcome and thank you for being here this evening.
You never question Jonathan. That works.
Well, I will try to be as brief as I can, because it's also my 30th wedding anniversary tonight, so. The fact that I'm here, my wife is a little bit.
You didn't tell me that.
Like 2 months ago, he's like, hey, how about we date? I'm like, sure,
No
no problem. By the way, honey, I have to work tonight. So yeah, it may already have cost me a little. But anyway, so no, my wife is I've been doing this. My name is Dave Morgan. I'm the CEO of the YMCA here in Greater Kalamazoo. I've been doing this kind of Y work for about 38 years, 39 years of my life. And so I'm here a little bit just give you kind of an update about what's going on in our work and kind of how this has started. And I know the board, I provided most of this information beforehand. But again, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. Look, just quickly about the Y. Obviously, the Y is an organization that's been around for over 180 years, serving children and families. And about 4 years ago, I was in a YMCA breakfast, talking a little bit about myself, talking about the Y story, my Y story, and what the Y can do for a community. And I'm a byproduct of the Y. I grew up in a little broken home. I first generation not only graduate college, but graduate high school in my family. And so, but I found the Y at about 13, and the Y gave me an opportunity to kind of change the trajectory of my life. And so I've been doing this for a while, and kind of my mission has been just to kind of move the Y forward in our work that we do. So about 4 years ago, I was telling the story about the Y, and Mary Beth and a few other people came to me afterwards and said, you know, it's great that the YMCA is in Kalamazoo and doing great work, but there's other areas of this region that aren't being served by the YMCA's type of work. And so we sat down and kind of told the story of how YMCA gets started. And it's not really, we're not a Culver's, you know, we're not, you know, it's not that kind of franchise type of thing where, hey, we'll build one here and build one there. Every YMCA is really just a community center of that community. It's not, it is owned, operated, and managed by the community. And that's where my first story to her was that it's not Kalamazoo Y coming in and building a YMCA in Mattawan, Paw Paw, or wherever that area ends up being. That's not the role of the YMCA. The role of the Y is to work with communities and help them decide if a YMCA or other type of community center is right for them. And so that's kind of the process we started with. And so you can kind of see in the quick map, you know, where our service areas lie now in the dark purple. And we started looking at, okay, how could we serve that dotted area, that Mattawan, Paw Paw, Lawton region? And that's kind of where the discussion started. So as we went forward, it really started with, I sat down and said, okay, here's the things that the YMCA can provide, and we'll do it at no cost. And so all this time that I've been part of this, or the Y's been part of it, really is, the Y is not in making any money. We're not charging anything. The whole process has been just us helping the community drive this project forward. And so in March of 2019, between March and November 2019, we really started just kind of putting the process together. There were a number, it started with Robin was involved in that, Scott and Tim and others, Mary Beth, Renee Rodriguez. So we really just got together and said, okay, here's how this process gets going. And we started with, in December 2019, with a community needs assessment. We surveyed over 900 community members. We had 3 open community discussion groups. We had multiple stakeholder meetings, and we really came up with some good information that helped us decide if we wanted to go forward. The people really we wanted to know if people wanted a Y and what kind of facilities that might include. You know, whether it's pool, childcare, or whatever those services might be. And we had some great results out of that. They really came forward, and people were very interested. There was not a negative side. And I'll tell you that 900 surveys, typically when a YUSA comes and does, especially a smaller community, you know, we'll get a couple hundred at best. 900 is far exceeds every expectation. So people were clearly intrigued and interested in giving as much input as they could. And so then we said, okay, there's obviously community interest, so where do we go from there? And so I put a task out to the group and said, you do have to raise some money, because there are gonna be some costs moving forward. Not for the why, but we're gonna need to do a real market study, because we're gonna need to make sure that this is a viable product. Is this region the right spot? Where in this region is the right spot? And then how many memberships are we gonna sell? Because there's one thing about building a YMCA, but it's sustainability, that's the key, right? We wanna make sure that if we build something that we're not going in 5 years from now, we can't afford to keep it active. And so we had to do some work, and so the group went into the community and worked with Charles River and a number of other, Moyle, and many people came forward and donated. We raised the $50,000 that I'd set, the threshold that I had asked for, and that allowed us to do some of that preliminary work. And you'll see some of those results here in a minute. So we did that in 2020, and lo and behold, kind of the world came to a halt, right? March of 2020 till about September 2021, we did a little bit of a COVID pause, just like everything else in the world kind of paused. We said it just wasn't the right time. The Y was really shifting its gears. We were closed for about 177 days. We started doing food delivery and emergency child care and a variety of other things within the community, and had to reshift our focus and our attention. But then I gathered the group back up in October 21, and we did our first kind of we hired an organization to come in and do a true market study. Say, okay, test 3 locations. We tested 2 in kind of the Paw Paw area, and then we tested an address right outside here, which is the property that the school has been generous enough to kind of set aside for this possible project, the property right across from Charles River. So we tested all 3, and this one tested very well. It tested, so the 2 locations that tested best were Highway 60 exit and Highway 66, and Highway 66 tested as well as we would hope. It was definitely a sustainable model. There was enough membership base. What we found was things like we looked at cannibalization of how many Y members we'd lose from our existing, probably. Because it doesn't do any good to build another YMCA, then all you're doing is just taking from another YMCA. And so we tested that. We tested how much people would be willing to pay. And we hired a firm that does this, is exceptional at this type of work. So we could feel confident the data that we got was viable and reliable. So we did that. We hired Tower Pinkster because we've had a long history of Tower Pinkster. We also know the district's had a long history with Tower Pinkster and the master plan. We thought hiring organizations that knew the community was important, so we hired them to just prepare some conceptual drawings, and then we hired a firm in July to do a feasibility study. So the market study and the feasibility study were the 2 main costs. And the feasibility study would then tell us a few other things. So let me go through some of that real quick. So I mentioned the market study. We did a number of focus groups through there. We did another 400 interviews of area residents who were not Y members. And then we did about another 1,200 interviews of YMCA members of Greater Kalamazoo to, again, just test a lot of different theories around cannibalization, about rates, about all of that type of stuff that was going to be important for us to decide whether we were going to be able to move this project forward. What did we learn? We learned things like, or we went into it to learn how many households we could expect, what's the cost that they're willing to pay, location, and all those type of things that were important for us to move this project forward, as I said. And the research told us some great things. One is 82% of the people felt like this was a good or excellent project to consider. The other data that was important was the location was clearly important to folks. It gave us the expected membership units, fees, and the amenities that people were going to be interested in, things like the pool and child care and all those type of things. What we found other key things were a pool was a high priority for folks. And I know that's been a thing that stemmed a lot of this original discussion. Indoor, but multi-purpose pool was really important for people as well. They wanted the idea of there was a need for a competitive pool, but what we've also learned, that's not the need what people want or families want for swim lessons, those type of things. And so we had to work through that, and that'll get into the cost of this project and why it escalates a little bit. And then wellness centers, indoor things for adults. And what we really found, which was interesting, is, and I think this goes back to the tradition of the YMCA, is that our ability to serve all, right? It was cradle to grave. It was infant to seniors. All had the same interest. Young families had the interest, seniors had an interest, and that's not always the case with when you start looking at projects. Oftentimes there's a contingency of this is what they want, but truly the entire community had the same interest, much the same way, and they all felt really confident in this type of project. So then we went into our next phase, the feasibility study. We said, okay, if we want to build it, we have to start getting some costs built around it, what it's going to cost us, and then how much money can we raise around it. And so we started doing some of that. There's a variety of different things we tried to learn from this. The financial support, the timing, what elements are strong, what were weak, and was the why the right partner for that. We wanted to make sure that people felt confident in the why and the work that we've been doing. Because as I said all along, this is not for me or the why to put a feather in their cap. My goal all along is just to allow the community to decide what was in their best interest. And we don't have a vested interest, a financial or otherwise, in this project, other than making sure that the Mattawan, Van Buren County is served as they need to be served. You know, I truly believe that the Y is the right organization to do that. Again, I truly believe in the work that we do. I believe that we help kids reach their full potential every day. I know that we help people get healthy and be well, and we support our friends and neighbors to succeed. And so, you know, I feel really confident in that, but the community needs to feel confident in that as well. And what we found was the Y has a very solid reputation. People really were intrigued and excited about the Y. They knew what they were going to get. It was a product they could feel comfortable with. They understood that you know, the community funding it was going to be a challenge. When we first started this project 4 years ago, the same project looked at about $21 million. Today it's about $31 million. And so, as we've all seen with escalation of building costs, that's the true escalation of all this. What we also found out was, again, there was real interest in a pool, that it was kind of an all or nothing thing. People were not really interested in a phased plan of you know, small thing here and hopefully building onto it. They really felt like initially they wanted kind of the all or nothing, right? And there's the challenge and kind of a little bit of the rub, to be honest. When you start looking at pools out of this project, when you're looking at 2 pools, 2 aquatic centers, that's probably half or 2/3 of the total cost of the project. Aquatic centers are not cheap to build, and we all know that because that's just a reality of building costs, right? And I think that's why some districts, school districts and otherwise, decide it's a challenge to decide whether to do a pool or not, right? But we also know we live in a state, in a region that water safety is a priority, or should be a priority. Kids are drowning at a higher level today than they were just 3 years ago. Pre-COVID, it's continued to escalate. We also know those that are underserved are more likely to be at risk. Those of color, those of a lower income, and so we need to make sure that everybody has access. And again, that's the importance of this, is that we're not looking at pools necessarily to develop state swim championships. It's to make sure that kids survive their childhood. That's a key component for us. And then what we learned is, again, nearly every interview expressed interest in donating. We've had some up to 6-figure considerated gifts, but we've got a lot of work to do. I'll be honest, the one thing that came out of this clearly, that partnerships were going to be the key to this, that it wasn't going to be just, there's no $31 million donor out there that's going to drop in $31 million and say, here it is. This is going to be some heavy lifting. It's going to be some work, but you know, as people continue to move towards areas and outside what I would call suburban Kalamazoo and Portage area to areas like Mattawan and Paw Paw and others, they want the same amenities that they got when they lived in Kalamazoo and wherever else they come from. And as businesses like Charles River continue to want to grow and hire folks and get them to move in here, and when you want more kids to come into your school districts, they're going to expect amenities that they could get other places. And so that's the things those are the challenges, and those are the things that we consider along this way. Just to kind of review, that's the piece of property. We also wanted to make sure, we had to hire architects to make sure that if this piece of property, would it actually work? Would it suffice? And would a YMCA actually fit into it? And so we kind of played around. Again, we hired Tower Pinkster. We used some of that money we donated to test the model. We put some pictures together so people could begin to visualize it. We met with donors to show them what a YMCA in Mattawan and Van Buren County might look like. And so it's about a 60,000 square foot facility that we're testing right now, 2 pools, what I would call 5 multi-purpose rooms, because we didn't want to lock ourselves into a specific project as far as what that might look like, but we've heard, childcare continues to be a need for every community. We right now serve about 800 kids a day in our childcare programs, and that's only growing. I will tell you the other thing that is like I said, is my 30th anniversary. I started today at 6 o'clock because I was working a childcare site this morning because staffing issues are a challenge everywhere in childcare. So yes, the CEO gets to work a childcare site once in a while, and I was at Mooresbridge Elementary School this morning playing. I actually had a rubber hand bracelet I made. I should have showed it off today, but yeah, there you go. That could be an anniversary gift. But we wanted to make sure as we talk to folks like Charles River, who's been intimately involved in this process, we want to make sure we're not, again, it's not a culvert. We're not coming in and saying here's what it looks like. We're building what the community wants and what it needs. And so we tested 5 multi-purpose rooms because that will allow us to do some flexibility in our programming, gym, walking track, locker rooms, those type of things. But it's really going to be a funding of private and public financing. So we've got some work to do. We're kind of waiting for the elections to get over because we have a few legislators to meet with and we started meeting with them beforehand, but as you get into about September, their lives are even more changing, and so we kind of had to wait to see how some elections played out as we meet with them and decide where to take this project forward. So with that, I spewed out a lot at you real quick, but any questions for me? Building is probably an 18-month project at least, I would think. Again, it's so hard to tell planning files. You guys deal with it every day as I do. I ordered a boiler back in February and I still don't have it yet at the Y. And so, the supply chain, we have a project we're planning for next year already. We started buying the supplies already now. And so, that how that plays out this kind of COVID delays, how long that continues, that's hard to say. But we've got a lot of work to do still. We've got a lot of funding to navigate through. But I can't thank Randy and the school board for continuing to allow us to at least have these conversations and setting aside that land as we consider this. And I know Scott Sylvester was on the board, and he was integral part of this in the beginning and stuff. So I really want to thank all of you for that time.
I don't believe you're going to have any problem selling community, mainly the pool.
Mm-hmm.
People have wanted a pool here forever. I know what they cost. I know what they cost to maintain, and it just hasn't worked out for us. I think that's going to be a really big selling point. Do they look at, once the novelty wears off and things do decline a little, if it would still sustain itself?
Again, I think that our initial projections are the initial membership numbers are tight. But they are enough to sustain an operation of this size. And I honestly believe as we start looking at as amenities do increase in here, you're going to see a population change, continue to see a population change, and people will be interested in moving out. Charles River is trying to expand, but they don't have the employee base to continue to do that. Amenities like this will allow that to happen. So I do think it'll only increase. We've actually, so give you some information. March of 2020 was the largest membership month the organization had in its history, and so I've been here about, I started in 2018. By 2020, we were our largest YMCA we've had in our community, and then the world shut down. We lost, I shouldn't say, we maintained half our membership, even being closed for 177 days. That's how much confidence our community had in our YMCA. So while we lost half, we maintained half our membership paid their dues for 6 months, even though we were closed, because they knew we were doing food distribution, we were doing emergency childcare, we were paying our staff, we didn't lay people off, we continued to do the good work we do. And so I think that message, we feel confident as we continue to build that and grow, that it will be sustainable and it will only grow. The other thing that I would mention, because YMCA's, and I got here, my job, and this is my second Y, to kind of come and do a little bit of adjusting for a Y. We invest in our facilities, and that's not some Ys get older, they get worn down. That's not the way I operate a YMCA. We invested 3 times more money in our buildings last year than we did the year before, and that was with our membership down, because we feel that it's important for our members to have quality projects, quality programs, quality facilities, and so that there isn't a wane in interest in our organization.
Are you still considering or deciding on the location then?
So our location, if our location right now is, we're committed to that location here in Mattawan. Like I said, we tested 2 in kind of the Paw Paw area. This one tested as well as one of the ones in Paw Paw, which was the kind of performance field house area. I don't know if you know where that is. We tested that one because we had been in conversations with them, because it was a building that was already partially built. It could meet some of our needs. We tested that. We tested the Highway 60 exit and then 66. And this one tested as well. The one on 60 and 66 were almost identical is the way they tested. The one in Performance Fieldhouse tested the lowest. And so we felt really confident. In the light of the relationship we've had with the Mattawan School District, we felt like that was the one we were bound to go forward with.
Could you educate us a little bit, just what other sources of funding are available to a YMCA when it builds? I mean, there's corporate, there's private, are there state grants, tax levies?
Yeah, and that's all we're looking at. There are a lot of, almost all Ys today are built with some kind of public-private partnership. Right now, I'll give you an example. There's ones, Caledonia is doing what the school district is doing one with the Y, where the school district is funding the project, and the Y is going to operate that project. There are medical partnerships. We are obviously trying to, and again, this goes back to the kind of the delay of the elections, is still trying to connect with whether it be ARPA or what other funds might be available through state and federal funding pockets, I guess. And so we're kind of testing everything right now to try to find out if we could piecemeal something like that together. There are Ys that have gone into bond with townships and other things, and those are conversations that we are perfectly having right now.
Dave and Mary Beth, always good to see you both. Appreciate our time together on all the meetings. And remember when we were Zooming?
Yeah. This is actually
all of
nice.
us. Yeah, no, this is great.
I look forward to getting together with people in person.
I know, but not on your anniversary. So,
Yeah.
Two questions. I kind of know the answer to this, but it probably would be good for the board to hear. You've kind of touched on pieces of it. The group's next steps, just kind of a timeline, next steps, and then how can we continue to support the project, the investigative process here as it's moving forward?
Yeah, again, I think that the couple things that we're in the process of doing is, now that the elections are over, we'll be setting up meetings with Eric. We had some conversation with Eric Nesbitt's staff already, with Eric himself, Sean McCann, and trying to, so we're working on the legislator side. I'm also have some of my responsibilities right now are to coordinate some meetings with the leaders of the township, Antwerp Township, had some conversation with them and to find out, again, their interest in this and how that might could be moved forward. I think it's important that, the district consider what value it might have for them as well, particularly around the pool and the aquatic center. There are a lot of, again, partnerships are in this area. I came from Dane County, and my original Y was the Madison Y in Dane County, Wisconsin, and we had a lot of partnerships with school districts, and where, especially around the aquatic center, because they're expensive to run, expensive to maintain, and no one wants to deal with them. No one wants to hire a lifeguard. No one wants, and so we came in because that's our area of expertise. So we came in and we managed at least, I think, 6 different pools: Stoughton, Cambridge, Lodi, and a variety of different pools around the community. Because the school district said, "Hey, that's not our area. We'd rather not do that." And so, as we continue to look forward, how can we, when we build something like this, how can it serve the school and their students? Whether it be swim lessons or swim team and all those, because right now I think the Mattawan swim team is swimming at my Y now in Portage a couple days a week already. And so how can we do that? How can we continue to look at and build a relationship and meet the needs of the community? Every now and then I'll hear, because I'll be at a childcare site, and then people go, "Oh, your Y kids are doing it." I go, they're not my Y kids. They're the same kids you just had in your classroom 45 minutes ago. They're all our kids. And the day that every kid is served at the level they deserve to be served, it'll be a great day. And we're nowhere near that. So they're all our kids, and we just all got to come together and figure out a way to serve them.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go home and see my wife.
And you all are awesome.
Thank you all.
Just think we can save so many lives, change the children, everybody can learn. Miss Mary Hart may be quiet.
If I had like 12 people with Mary Beth's energy, if anybody knows Mary Beth, I just...
You guys all rock. Hey, congratulations. Thank you. I was a teacher for 25 years. Now I'm old.
Thanks, Randy, and thanks, David, for coming in. It's exciting to think about. I know that when we first started talking about that a lot of years ago, and the opportunity to maybe use that, part of the investment, the schools, is the land, right? And I know we've talked through some of that, and that's, I think it'd be a great thing for our student body to have. The ability to have swim lessons in middle school or elementary school or whatever is a great opportunity. So support that in any way we can. Next, we had up the school board report. I don't currently have anything to report, right? It's been a busy month just keeping kids going to school, right? But I'm doing homework. I don't know if anybody else has anything for the school board report.
I was just going to briefly go over MASB conference that we went to. They had a really strong focus on school boards and their direction for the new year, to really think about, where they're headed. Their suggestions were the main areas that we should focus on were student achievement and growth, which they're different. I had to do some research on that, and I learned something from that, and onboarding. And they talked a considerable amount of time on onboarding and some of the breakout sessions also. And they also, the other thing that they brought up was they said boards that go from good to great do self-assessment. And that's something that if we do it, we have to really let the community know that we're taking that chance of, putting out there, this is where we are, this is what we need to do, and, it's all about learning to be better. And so I thought that was really good. The classes that they're offering, I know there's one for all new board members, which I can't remember if that one was free, but there's a lot of funding for classes if anybody wants to take them virtual or go, in person. And actually, the monies weren't used as much last year, so they cut back on the amount of money that they are giving to schools. So we really, if we go, if you research that, then, we need to use that funding. Jen Smith, who's our legislative liaison with MASB, gave numerous updates on different things with that, and that's on the website, all the time. So that's about it.
I do have one thing, and it's just kind of in the initial planning stages. Randy and I have been talking about just a little bit, and it has to do with the fact that we did have an election. I don't know if anybody's heard about it, but there was an election in the last week or so, and the votes have been counted, and we had four members. We have 4 members joining or staying or joining the board. One's here tonight. Rick's here tonight. We've got Honor Arugazlan will be joining us. And then Marika and Sherry both were reelected to be part of the board. So excited to continue to work with you two, and excited to work with Honor again. Excited to work with Rick. Which brings me to a few years ago now. We did a board governance meeting or a session where we talked about how boards work together and the trials and tribulations of being on a public board and what that entails and what you can do and what you can't do. And it all seems really foreign to people who don't work in the public sector. So I've reached out to Gary Ryder, who we've worked with in the past as a consultant, and who's come in and done some strategic planning work with us. And he has indicated he would work with us again in the spring to have a meeting where we could do a board governance workshop. I know it was really important to me as a younger board member, newer board member, I guess I should say it wasn't young, newer board member, when I came on to learn some of the nuances and things of being on a board. So, and if you look around at what happens with boards lately, if you look at high functioning boards, a lot of them act and work in a similar manner. And I think we have a great board, and I'd just like us to continue that and to be able to take that next step as well. So I'm excited to be able to nail that down as we get, Gary's in Florida for the winter, so it'll probably be in the springtime before we do that. Give some newer folks some time to adjust and get into the seat, and then we'll find a time that we can meet with Gary. So that's what I had. And then put my agenda somewhere. We had our fiscal update. So Pam, if you'd like to help with that.
Sure, thank you. I don't have a whole lot tonight, just a couple, some small pieces of information. You know that the audit, we are done with the audit, and that is set to be presented next month. Yo and Yo will be in to do that, so we'll cover that. We did get there are still unaudited enrollment numbers for fall, and we ended up at just over 3732 FTE, which is right about what we projected for the budget at 3729, so it was pretty close. The budget revision we're going to be working on for December as well, so next month might be a little busier on this end. We finished open enrollment in the district, and health insurance rates, we had those in, and those went up by about 6%, so not terrible. I was kind of pleasantly surprised with that, given the situation with COVID and everything. I thought the rates could go up a lot more, but it doesn't look too bad, and that's for calendar year 2023, so we actually split, our fiscal year kind of covers both, part 22 and 23. We're in our office, we're still digging into our new systems and learning more about them. They're getting slightly easier. We're getting there. It's a big learning curve, but we're working on it. And we're working on updating our budget transparency on the website. Usually after the audit, there's a number of items that are listed there that need to get updated. So we're working on those. I don't know if anybody checks that out, but it's getting there. So, and let's see. We have our grant applications in, I think just about all of them that we talked about last month, and just waiting on approval and word on those. So that's where things stand in our office. Any questions?
I don't have any.
Okay, thank
Anybody
you.
else? Thank you. Then next we got a curriculum update, which comes from Mr. Larner, and I know that I thank you for sending out the information that you did in regards to how we compare to other districts in the area. It was nice to see. It was good to be able to look into. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'll let you speak too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really just some professional development updates. Recently on Halloween, we actually had a full day of collaborative learning time with all of our teachers district-wide, and really spent the morning, first time in a district-wide vertical team meeting. And so every staff member across the district was connected to a vertical team. We had K-5, ELA, math, science, social studies, as well as all of our specials teams connected with district-wide K-12 teams, and then as well at the secondary. And a lot of the discussion was, around, kind of the development of instructional frameworks and having just some discussion around what does instruction look like at the secondary level in a social studies classroom. What does it look like at the elementary level when we're delivering reading, instruction during a class period? And so it was great to be able to, bring grade level teams together and really start having some vertical dialogue, kind of identifying maybe what were some of the gaps that they've been identifying with our essential standards, and just coming closer towards alignment. And great feedback from all of the teachers in talking with the administration about how their sessions went. We're going to try to do that, have a vertical team session each of our full professional development days. So I believe our next one will be January 23rd, and then I believe our last one for the year is like March 14th. So it gives us some time to identify what are some things that we need to collect some data around, and then we have administrators that are kind of leading those conversations, and then they will come to the next meeting and help facilitate that conversation. So overall, all of those discussions from the feedback we've received went really well, and we're just looking forward to continuing those opportunities throughout the rest of the year. Just a reminder, our next professional development day is November 22nd. It's the Tuesday before we depart for Thanksgiving break. And, again, our teachers are going to be engaged in the collaborative learning time, talking about common assessments, looking at standards, and, just identifying, are our students meeting our standards? Again, all based around those 4 questions around a professional learning community culture. And what are we doing when students aren't meeting the learning expectations that we've established for the classroom? And then, really just kind of an update. This is more of a smaller internal group professional development. Actually, this week on Wednesday, we're going to be holding what's called Process Champions. And this is kind of the next step of continuing fidelity implementation of Capturing Kids' Hearts. And so we have a Capturing Kids' Hearts facilitator coming into the district to lead some professional development with small cohorts from every building, and really just talking about, how do you go about continuing and making sure that you're implementing the practices, within the model with fidelity. And then for the next 2 days, our facilitator is actually going to be meeting with our building administration for about half of a day and doing some fidelity walks. So that will be exciting, because they're going to be able to have these folks that have been living, kind of this culture and going around to the buildings and just kind of identifying what are some things that are going well with our initial implementation, what are some things that we can start talking about for growth and improvement. So very exciting that we're able to have some of the folks that have been leading this work for the next, 3 days, basically Wednesday through Friday. So really looking forward to that.
And just in case we have anybody new joining us online, I'll reiterate again, because it seems like I have this conversation a couple times a month with folks about half days and how annoying half days are. As I try to explain to them, part of that is the reason for it is this professional learning. Teacher development is important. Being able to work with your colleagues in a way to help grow each other and to grow the district and to grow our kids is important, and providing them that time and space to do that is something that we made a priority. So that's why that's the importance for those half days. And I'll say from a parent of a little kid, they really like that they move around, so they don't have to miss art every time because it's always on a Wednesday, and they don't have to miss gym every time because it's on a Monday or whatever. So they enjoy the fact that we're moving those half days around. As parents, makes it a little harder to plan, right? But in Samantha's world, that's awesome. So appreciate it, and that's why we're here, is for our kids first. So thanks for that. I think that's all we have for I guess, presentations and reports. Getting into new business, we did have 3 overnight trip requests. One was for what is the bi-yearly or yearly trip to Costa Rica, and 2 were overnight trip requests for hockey, for sports, for competitions. So I'll make a motion to approve the 2 overnight trip requests, or the 3 overnight trip requests. Support. I'll open up to discussion. So I've got a question to ask, I guess, which is in regards to we're still working through the trip request, it appears, or the process, right? So I guess the question is, have we nailed down like what is supposed to be? These are probably the 2, I guess, these are the first 2 sports ones we've seen, right? So is our teams expected to do this now too, or how are we communicating that?
Yes, we did get clarification. So any overnight trip that's not considered an emergency, like in a playoff situation where, at the end of the season, we may not know, and then we've got a week to figure it out. The superintendent has privilege just in that kind of emergency situation. But the way the policy currently stands is anytime our students are overnight on a school-sponsored activity, it should come in front of the board. So also in the investigation, that's kind of the standard Neola policy. So the board can take latitude and adjust that if they so desire, if they only want to look at foreign travel, let's say, and any kind of intrastate overnight or in-state, not intra, you probably want to look at if they're going across state lines. So, and that could be something where, as it stands now, yes, overnight's got to come unless it's an emergency, unless that policy is adjusted.
Okay. The only reason I asked is because sometimes sports schedules flex, right? And what I don't want to have is for a team or group of kids to miss out on something. I wouldn't necessarily classify in the terms of the word, a sporting event to be an emergency, right? So even though it can, I know what you're getting at.
Right,
I get the spirit and intent. What I want to make sure is that we're not missing, baseball kids aren't missing a tournament or whatever that came up last minute because the coach doesn't have the time or thought to put these in. So it's just, I don't know. Not
Right,
asking
no.
for change, I guess,
No,
but-
that's a great point. So this is kind of brought up discussion internally, and this is predominantly at the high school. The older kids are moving more, so through Tim's office into Chad's office, making sure at these startup meetings we're reminding folks and that Chad, our athletic director, is kind of keeping on folks. Yep, please do. Yeah, fill in the gaps.
Yeah, so what we did specific this year.
Tim,
because of the-
or Mr. Eastman, could you just, hit the microphone just so folks out in the metaverse can hear us?
I got green light. So what we did this year is going into the winter season, because I know that hockey has these trips. So Chad just talked to the coaches and said, make sure you submit these. One question I would have is, and just looking for clarity and knowing some of the nuances of the different sports, swim's a great example, and that's kind of my bailiwick. But if they qualify for the state meet, they may do that, based on time, they may do that in January.
they may do that at the conference meet in March. So then you run into that weird situation of, is it emergency, is it not emergency? You know, because if they qualify in January, my guess is you'd probably still want a trip request. If they qualify in March, the way the state meet falls, and actually the same thing we didn't qualify this fall, but the state meets this weekend. So it'd be interesting to submit something to you the week of the event. So there is some clarification or some tweaking to this that I would love to see, just to make it easier for everybody. Yeah. Scrambling's no fun.
It's a weird spot we find ourselves in, right? Because we create policies and then don't think about, we create, but policies are created and then you gotta live inside of them.
Right.
So we hire athletic directors and things like that for a reason, right? And this is my take. That is, if the athletic director approves those things, then I don't know that I need to, right? It's the same thing that we go through with hiring coaches. At one time, for whatever reason, the school board was supposed to vote on all the coaches, and I'm not an expert in that. Not an expert in much. So the idea that need me for that is less, right? But I think the intent of these was for, I guess I don't know. I don't know exactly what the intent was. It seemed like it was more, sports or extracurricular. It seemed like it was more outside of that realm. Like, and I guess outside. Yeah,
It could be a check and balance. I think, you know, so Mr. Fleener mentioned, you know, like intrastate, you know, that does get into some crazy stuff, and other school districts are going to that, you know, where you have more competitions. We probably see it more like probably with the Detroit, like the Catholic League and some of the schools over there. They might be traveling to Toledo. The MHSAA has opened it up now that schools can travel to other states without actually even having to file an appeal with the MHSAA. But at one point, you had to really jump through some hoops to do that. So I wonder if that policy was crafted, you know, because of that. You know, it just went hand in hand. You're appealing to MHSAA, so you probably should run it by your board as well. But, you know, I don't know. We could probably look at it 10 different ways and come up with 10 different answers too.
I think part of the emphasis when we discussed this 10 years ago was liability that the board and the school faces, because remember it came up with French Club was the one I remember that they were going to Paris again. And we said, wait a second, where's our liability fall in this? And as I recall at that time, the first time I went through it, everybody kind of looked at each other and said, whoa, we don't know. And that's where I was glad to see on this Costa Rica trip that spelled out pretty clearly that liability's covered. So, but the sports, yeah, it kind of spilled over into that, and we're covered under our usual contracts, I believe, for any sports travel within the state, like you say. I don't know if we go outside the state.
Probably a lot around safety, chaperones, cost, that the board has oversight on that. From a mechanical standpoint, I don't have the policy in front of me, but I do believe there's actual verbiage in there about playoffs, districts, and anything kind of that would come up at the end of a season would not necessarily need to come in front of the board. I'd need to update the board after the fact. But I would submit if the board, I'd suggest if you're looking for options, the policy committee could take a peek at it.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd ask, because, we talk about things that cost kids money, right? That's one. There's just so many weird things with different sporting events, sporting things that happen that, I don't know about hockey, but there are others where you have to have so many competitions in order to qualify for for postseason play or for any play. And if a meet or an event gets canceled, you're trying to find another one in order to help the kids qualify, and it could be an overnight trip, right?
Yeah, ski is a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, you run into a whole different animal because of ski versus hockey.
I don't mind filling these things out or having Dave fill these things out, but the idea there of the last minute thing, I guess, is the emergency, and I don't think playoffs, the way it sounded, encompasses it enough, right? And I also don't think that some of these things I don't think lean on the expertise of the leaders in the buildings and the leaders of the curriculum enough, right? They should really be knowing these things and approving them, not necessarily always the board. So I'll leave that to the policy committee. It's just my 2 cents.
Okay, so just to clarify, would you like then the policy committee to review the policy and suggest something to address the conversation? I'm kind of hearing that you more latitude on athletic events, or just so I clearly understand.
I want to hear other. If I
Fair
were
enough.
king for the day, I would say yes. I would like to.
Okay.
Maybe go so far as I don't know that athletic events, athletic things need to be a part of this. But I'll throw it.
I think
I
it would
guess
be a
all
good
I would,
idea.
whoops, is it Sherry talking?
Oh, sorry.
All I was thinking, policies are common cause, right? And then you have the special causes, and I think you're mentioning special causes. But I also know that you have a professional association that develops some of these things and probably gives you some pointers about why they're putting them in place, why they're not putting them in place. And so we would want to understand that before I would even suggest where we go, because then you have attorneys that look them over, right? That say, yeah, this is probably where the line is where your liability exists. So I guess I wouldn't jump at anything right now without having some of that more background.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think if we pull the existing policy and start with a review at the policy committee, that would be the way to go, because it seems like there might be something in there already about end of season, athletics, playoffs, et cetera. So I think it's a good next step.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever seen anything come up for an end of season game. I mean, this is scheduled season games overnight because there's a lot of travel involved, Traverse City and Big Rapids. And so I think that's the reason why these came up. And I think it's for ease of scheduling, ease of cost. If you're gonna play these teams twice in a season, do it on one trip and don't pay the expense of the travel twice. So I think that's why these are a little different. And if we look at the policy, which I think is fine, we need to address that. Scheduled in-season games versus playoff games at the end of a season.
If I'm not mistaken, there's something also in the policy about a time frame, like 3 months in advance, 2 months in advance, et cetera. I don't know if that's, I guess that would be something I would recommend looking at. So for example, the coaches may be putting together a schedule early, but they may not have that opportunity to nail everything down. So in this case, hockey actually started their tryouts, 2 weeks? I think it was 2 weeks ago. They've nailed down their schedule. In one case, they're looking at travel here coming up, December? Whereas there's another one, you're looking at January or February. So that 3-month time factor may not always be applicable or necessary, or, whatever term you want to use. So that might be something to look at.
I believe that was put in primarily for trips like this Costa Rica, like Dave Hook's annual trip to New York with the Master Singers, the band to Disney World, things like that. When it comes to the competition, some of that changes overnight too. There's got to be a little bit of gray area there that can be overlooked. That 3-month time frame was in there because there was a certain choir teacher that was always really, really, really late getting his stuff
Not sure what
in.
you're saying there, but
Just saying.
no, understand.
Okay, well, I will, as it's working out, policy committee is active right now, so we'll get that back on the docket. Thank you.
So as we balance our want to know and our need to know, right? There's the two different things there for the policy committee. I guess we can move to a vote unless there's any further discussion on the overnight trip requests. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those approved or all those opposed? Wow. Say aye. Motion passes. All right. Now we're gonna keep talking about policies. So it looks like it's Bruce and Randy get to talk to us about the fall policy updates.
I just told Marina I was just waiting for you to miss one of these times and catch your phone with the gavel, 'cause
It's already happened.
we had, what do we have, 4 policies we were looking at? We kind of shelved the one because of some wording. The ones that we went over are minor changes, mostly wording. Nothing too, wording and/or changing how they described, like preferred vendors for non-district purchases. Mostly just clarifications on them, nothing too bad. The Fair Labor Standards Act, that's just in line with a lot of other companies with what they're doing now. Things that weren't there before. And then which one did we shelve, Randy?
I'm sorry, say again?
I believe we talked about the
They even got
banners,
policy on drones.
the banners thing. we
Oh, the
deci-
flags, the
Flags and
flags,
banners thing, we
yes.
decided that that wasn't something that
That's-
we needed revision on the policy on.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah.
So this is the first reading. I know we've all had a chance to read through these things. It really is just a few, grammatical things, not a ton of change. Remove some dates and some things. So I guess I'll entertain a motion if anybody wants to move to approve the first reading of the policy revisions.
I move to approve.
I support.
Would just add one caveat, which is standard. These all come at the recommendation of Neola, based on language changes or changes in the law. So always like to put that out there.
I guess I have just one question. That's on the Fair Labor Standards Act for a nursing mother that returns to work. Does that require that we have a separate room set up in each building for that, or can that be kind of ad lib that they can use someone's office for that time, or how do we do that?
My understanding is that it's through the conversation with the employee. We have to be prepared to have, obviously, a private area, typically staying away from closets and workrooms where one could be interrupted. In my kind of investigation, we're pretty much covered already. But yeah, to your point, this is just somewhere along the line, it didn't happen correctly in a school, and this is often the case. Then the adjustment comes, a little more clarity. So that hasn't been an issue here, but it goes a long way to just sit down and have a conversation with the employee and find out what they're comfortable with and just make sure. But yes, at the end of the day, we've got to provide space.
Since it's,
Yep.
since it's a national labor act, it most likely wasn't a school or us that caused this. All employers are required to give nursing mothers a place.
Right.
to
Part of my
do
reason
that.
for asking that was at the hospitals, we had to put in a separate room for that purpose, but there's probably a much higher percentage of nursing mothers, so it's usually in use too.
Right, just to clarify, right, we don't have to construct any rooms. We've got plenty of space. The key is that it's got to be private and kind of a secure space. A workroom isn't going to necessarily suffice, or a storage room or something like that. So I don't anticipate we'll have to add any facilities for this.
So
Did I
just
call
sort
for a
of-
motion already?
Oh, sorry, just a question. I think these policies are good changes and good recommendations. I think it was like early summer when we had some discussion about, we have policies 142.1, which is electoral process, and 142.3, which is terms, which I think we were going to take a look at because somehow what we just did was have the opportunity to roll off a majority of the board, which is what the state didn't want us to be able to do when they moved to 6-year terms. So I just didn't know the current progress or status of us looking into that. When we talked about it previously, we were too close to the election to make any adjustments, but I think we want to keep that on the radar that really needs to be adjusted for the district, as something in there got construed when we went from 4-year to 6-year terms.
Marika, that is correct. It was too close last time when we began investigating that and went down the rabbit hole, if you will. Let me re-engage on that now that we're through the election and see what the options are. Again, I don't have that in front of me, but I did have conversation with our attorneys about that, like what we could do in the future. I don't want to misspeak here tonight, but I did have that conversation back in, was that the summer? So let me refresh my thinking on that, and I'll definitely get that information out to the board, but I would agree, if we can, we'd want to capitalize.
Yeah, there probably needs to be some algebra equation done that figures out, well, in reality, in the next election or one of the next elections coming up, there's probably going to need to be a 2-year term put in there. One seat will have to be a 2-year term, and the others be probably 6 years from now when the group of 4 come up, so that there's 1 2-year term and then there's 3 6-year terms or 4-year terms, or however we determine to come up with it, so that we don't ever have a majority roll off.
Correct, and that's what I'll clarify. It was the 2-year term, if I recall, was the sticking point, and for the attorney and how we do that. But let me clarify all that, and I'll get that information back out to the board, and maybe we'll get that to the policy committee as well, because it might just end up needing to be a change of something in our bylaws. Thanks for reminding me.
All right. Any other discussion on policies? Did I call for a motion on that? I did?
You did. You made the motion, I believe.
I made it for the trip request. I don't know if I did it for the policy.
No, Bruce made it.
Oh,
Bruce made it for the
I don't
policies.
think we had a second.
Do we have a second?
You
Let's try this again. Anybody, do I have a motion to adopt the first reading of the policies? Bruce is first. Do I have a second? Anyone? Come on.
Yep,
All right, Vicky.
I think I did.
All right.
Yep. I already
So all
did
those in favor of the first reading of the board minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Our next topic is on an opportunity to talk through master site planning. I know it's part of our strategic plan, coming up with what the vision is for the district as far as the site goes. I mean, we had a little bit of conversation today about some land that's off-site that we were talking about donating or being a part of a YMCA. But there's other areas and buildings and things that we need to think about as we're talking about growth of the district and needs of our student body. So, Randy, I know you had proposed developing a committee of a few of the board members, 3, to talk about that next phase there. I know I'd like to be a part of that, and I think there's a couple others that we had on that list, which I can't find at the moment. You might be able to help me figure out who I
I
talked.
think I was part of that too, facilities planning.
Was Marika the other one?
Correct. Yes, the thought there, right on the money there is that lots of detail to work through and planning, and just thought maybe an ad hoc, much like how the policy committee operates. They're kind of in the weeds, kind of working through everything, and then bringing that information back to the board might lessen that burden and expedite the research a bit. Just kind of in talking with kind of Tower Pinkster, who's our current architect with the latest bond. Just from a timeline standpoint, we're on the right timeline. There is a bit of brewing urgency if the board is to consider the next bond initiative and when we have a bond maturing, and a lot of big questions. But yeah, that would be my proposal, that we maybe kind of carve this off to committee work and get kind of a standing update meeting at each month. And
I shouldn't have spoken as much. I realize
Oh.
now that I was looking at the presenter, the next one was supposed to be me. So that's why I kept talking so much about it. But
no, that's okay. So yeah, that's
So do we
just
need
the idea.
Do we need a motion for this, or do you want us to establish that committee now, or do you want, since
Well-
committee assignments are at the whim and behest of the executive team?
That's correct. I don't know if you need a motion for the ad hoc, maybe just a consensus, but I certainly think that's a beneficial and productive avenue, but I'm open to the board thought. I don't want to add more meetings and work, but I do think there's a lot to go through here, and paring that down and synthesizing it for the whole board probably would be very beneficial, and that could probably turn into a committee that could do a little bond pre-work if that day comes, and from there. So yeah, I'll definitely, we'll grind out the work if the board isn't feeling the ad hoc, but I think it could be a productive move.
Does anybody have any reservations about having an ad hoc committee to look into this?
So I don't know if I should be concerned, but just a thought. Do we need to create it now, is what I'm asking.
I don't know that, I would say that based on some of the conversation I've had with Randy, sooner rather than later is gonna be better for this. We have 4 new members, we really have two new members,
Really
one in reality, and they all will have time to get into a lot of different policy different committee work. And I don't want to hold anything up just because 2 more months if we don't have to.
Well, and to kind of piggyback with what Ted was saying, and any decision-making obviously would come back to the full board, and kind of, so part of the thought here is on the timeline. I kind of said that the urgency is kind of creeping up. That's all going to hinge on the board's thought, desire on the next bond. So if the board is wanting to pursue discussion about pre-bond work to capitalize on a bond that's maturing, so some districts might extend a bond that matures, so it's not an increase in the tax, it's a continuation of a current tax that's on the community. From that regard, there's a little bit of timeline urgency. So we'd need to get site assessments done this winter into the spring, any pre-bond work done coming into the spring. So I think if we waited another, till January, we're gonna really, I think, find ourselves under the gun to hit a deadline of capitalizing on a maturing bond. So that's one thought as to why an ad hoc could kind of help break down all that heavy information. Is the board interested in a construction manager or a buyer's advocate, or neither of those, and we just kind of use our operations people to do that ourselves? That ad hoc can get in there, synthesize all that, bring it back to the board to vote on it. However, parallel to that, so take any bond discussion out of it, we still know we want to do a capital plan, we want to do site assessment, we want to do a master site plan. So even if there wasn't a bond maturing, let's say, hypothetically, in the next 2 years. We'd still want that work to be done to plan. In that case, we probably could wait till January. So I think what I don't want to have happen is that we get into the winter months and there's just this desire and urgency to talk about pre-bond work, and then we've missed that kind of deadline, because we'd really be scrambling then. Yeah, so does that help? I don't want to inundate, but that's a fair question.
And
So hopefully that helps.
It may turn into a more, like Randy talked about, a more active committee, just because what I don't want the district to get into is another position where we don't do things to our facilities for a really long time, and then spring on the community this huge bond proposal for all new everythings, because we've done such a good job of keeping it up that we're hiding the fact that we've got 13 classrooms and portables again behind a building. I don't want to get to that spot again, right? So I think it's important that we just stay on top of it. I also think it's important, as you know, there's a lot to learn as a newer board member in the first few years, and as a board member who's been on the board a long time, and it's an opportunity to learn more. So there's some stuff I think I'd like to have Pam be a part of, to help talk through a little bit about school bond loan fund and what that means, and how we can more leverage that and take advantage of that for our community and for our taxpayers, in order to keep I know that there are ways, I've heard that there are ways that other districts utilize that in order to make sure that their buildings stay appropriate for the size. So I'm not hearing much, it wasn't even a dissent, but any other negatives towards having an ad hoc committee, I think I'd like to move forward trying to put one of those together. So I'll work with Randy here in the next day or two, tap you on the shoulder, ask you if you want to be a part of it, and then we'll move forward. So appreciate that. Next, we got conference. Speaking of continued education, one of the things we've asked Randy to do time and time again, and one of the reasons we enjoyed having Randy come on, is a different set of eyes from outside the district, and going to conferences and being a part of conferences, I think help grow our leaders, help grow our teachers. I think those are all important. Continuing education in those regards are as important. And we've been on Randy about trying to find time to go to a conference, and I think he's found one he'd like to go to. So I'd like to at some point move to approve Randy going to a national conference. So.
Do we need support?
Yeah, let's do that. I'll move that, and then if you.
You're moving it, I'll support.
Thanks, Vicki. So we got any discussion, or discussion, right?
Right, just to bookend that, Ted. This would be the first time for me to have the opportunity to attend a national level conference. So historically, there's been a lot of great attendance at state conferences, MASB. Mesa is always a crowd pleaser. So what I'm presenting to the board is a real opportunity here for the board to invest, as Ted indicated, in professional development. Now, over the last couple years, like most conferences, including this one, I think this was virtual last year, the year before it was canceled. So what we're seeing is just massive turnouts to these conferences now. Lots of energy. I think, Vicki and Sherry, maybe you guys felt that at MASV. Just record turnouts are happening. So there's an excitement level there for me. I did find out that actually one of my neighbors is going now out of Portage. Mark's gonna be, of course, he's the former, I think, president of the national committee. So Mark Bailing will be there. So that, nice networking local, but also at a national level. And I think one of the things that I kind of connected with is there a lot of discussion at this conference, even though the breakouts are not completely done yet. If you went to the website, it's a little thin on what's posted yet. They've got the keynotes. Stephen Covey's going to be there. You may know who that is. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from back in the day. He's always a great inspirational speaker, but a lot of focusing on wellness types of things, which kind of ties directly into a lot of what we've been talking about in our district. Not just social, emotional, but relational wellness. So a lot of, I think, overlaps in these breakouts. Connections, hopefully, with PLC, our PLC movement, and of course the big Capturing Kids' Hearts. So it would require me to be out of district in February. There are some expenses there that I noted to the board, but just appreciate the board's consideration on this. And it's a big deal. I'm kind of a homebody. I'm going to be really transparent with everybody. Jay's not surprised at all. So this is kind of a big deal. You know, my family was a little shocked when I said, hey, I might be going to a conference overnight somewhere. Anywho, I probably overshared there.
Excited, because anytime we go to things inside of Michigan, inside of the area, you're kind of yelling into an echo chamber, right? You hear the same things that everybody else is struggling with. You know, we talk about it at my place of employment a lot. You get to go to one of the other sites, and you kind of start to have this idea of, well, I'm not in this alone, right? There are other people that are doing the same thing. You know, we may want to bash our legislators from time to time, but there may be things going on, and I'm sure that same fight is happening in Kentucky and in Illinois and wherever, right? So nice to have a little of that. Like, I guess it's not just me. And also some things you can pick up from other districts. I think is important to bring back home and shamelessly steal from others. So, so I guess I'll take a vote if there's no other discussion. All those in favor of approving the conference for Randy, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you, board.
All right, and we got our second opportunity for public comment. Do we have anybody that signed up for public comment tonight? All right. So we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Randy?
All righty, we'll keep things going. I do have a couple items here for the board, just by way of update. Let's see here. I'll start with strategic plan. And there's a copy in the board packet, and I added this to the template just because I didn't want to forget to have this document, and it's a convenience thing that you guys can have it in front of you every board meeting if you need to reference it. So I know you've seen this. My update tonight would be we are, I believe, about 95% done with tentative action items. So very exciting. We've got a number of our administrators here tonight. I want to thank them for the heavy lifting they've been doing on the action items at our meetings, and our directors, and just a lot of back and forth with the school improvement teams, and a lot of conversation at the building level, department level. So I'm just kind of putting the finishing touches on what I'm calling kind of a goal tracker, which will have the goals. It'll be a different format, and it just quite wasn't polished to get to you tonight, and I didn't want to have a lengthy meeting. I thought that I'd save that for round 2 of the evaluation meeting next month. We can just really dig into that. But that'll be a nice public document with the goals, the action items, and then a very easy color code so you could quickly look at and see where we're at, whether the action items not been started, whether it's in process or completed. So I think it'll be a nice public kind of document for the board to look at, but also post online so the community can kind of track where this is all going. So I think the board will be pleased with this, and we've got our work cut out before us, and we'll look forward to that. Questions on the strategic plan? Let me just hit the pause button briefly, and just if you've got questions on that. Okay. I'll keep going. So Last week, we wrapped up bus evacuations. Those went well. Appreciate the flexibility with parents. Actually, buses weren't running that terribly late with the evacuations. They've got it really down out there. If you noticed, the stadium parking lot was kind of roped off one day, and some folks may have wondered what is happening with the carpool line now. It was just to make sure we had a chunk of asphalt set aside for bus evacuations. And speaking of safety, at this point in the year, we will have completed a lockdown drill, fire drill. So all of those items we have to log with local law enforcement and state and post. So we're right on schedule there. Couple other items just for the board to be thinking about. I had put in recent communication some work that we're doing to bring to the board, hopefully in December, on contingency funds. And just want to give you an update there. Pam Sturmer, our CFO, and Brian Cornish, mainly those two individuals have been working with myself and occasionally Mr. Larner on putting together some ideas for the board to consider for investment of some bond contingency funds. So we'll plan on, I think we're on track for having that in December. I think Brian emailed us Friday with a meeting request, right? Boy, you talk about contingency or anything funds to operational people, and they don't waste any time getting the numbers for you, and we appreciate that. So, board, be thinking about that as we come into December, and I'll get some communication out prior to that meeting. That if you've got questions, then we can go from there. But I think it's critical, especially as we're talking about a master, a capital plan and a master site plan. That those contingency dollars are part of that conversation, and that the community is aware that we're having those conversations. And one of the other items that we probably could lean on is some recent survey data when we look at what the community is kind of giving feedback on and our stakeholders are giving feedback on different ideas. So look forward to that. I'll keep the board updated on that. Excuse me here, I'm gonna check my list here. Boy, you've touched on most of these. Did want to welcome our newest teacher. It's good to have you. Things going well down with the little ones. It's always exciting. Isn't it exciting down there? Never a dull moment. So welcome to Mattawan. It's good to have you. Well, you've been here, but welcome to a new position. And also, one last comment about the YMCA piece. We do have a meeting in 2 weeks with that committee, and I hadn't thought about this before, and maybe something to ponder. Maybe, Ted, you and I could talk about if there's a board member that would like to replace Scott's vacancy. I know everybody's busy and you have a lot going on, so I just was thinking about that sitting here. I never addressed that or offered that up. We normally meet maybe once a month right now. It's been maybe 5 to 6 weeks. It's about an hour. I've kind of been relaying that information to the board. It's kind of been slow going a little bit, as Dave indicated, but that could be something we could put in the hopper, or maybe the board's fine with me just funneling information back. But we might kind of be coming into a time frame now as the election has passed and they have these final kind of update meetings and they're talking more about funding. I'm just wondering if another set of eyes and ears at that group may be a good idea.
If someone's interested in it,
Yeah.
let me know, and then
Yep.
we'll
Think about it. I won't do a hard sell right now, but I just sense it with all of the other site conversations we're having and planning. It might be good timing. Okay, so I will take. Did you say you have,
Also
you
be-
have lots of spare time?
That was like something for Maureen to do in her spare time now.
Could it be something for one of the new board members too? I mean, how many meetings do you have between now and January?
I like how you think.
I
No,
know
yeah.
Honor
Our-
has some good connections with the legislators already too, so.
That's
but-
true. And it's a low key, I mean, I think it's kind of a low key commitment. I mean, it's a big project, but they're not meeting all the time, and Dave does a great job running the meetings. You're basically just there listening kind of on behalf of the district. So, yeah, it could probably actually wait. And actually, I don't think we have a meeting till after the holidays, Maureen, now that you bring that up. So that actually could be good timing. We could maybe push that off and unless somebody's got a burning desire. Okay. That's all I've got on my list. I'll entertain any questions from the board.
You heard it, and that's all that matters. So, I guess now we just need a motion to recess, to go into closed session for initial conversations on evaluation. So that's a recess at 9 PM. It's really 8 PM. Thank God. I was like, what, 9?
What?
So it is 8 PM, thank goodness. I thought I had time warp. So anybody want to, I'll make that motion, can I get a second? Second from Sherry? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thanks, everybody.